Hello, students. This is Professor Karasi with Unit 6 for Developmental Psychology. I'm going to pull that up. Unit 6 deals with cognition across all of our developmental stages. Okay, so Piaget's constructivist theory of intelligence. Cognition is the ability of knowing and the processes through which knowledge is acquired and problems are solved. Piaget, who was a child psychologist, studied children using a clinical method. He used flexible question and answer techniques used to discover how children think about problems. Contemporary researchers consider this method imprecise because it does not involve asking standardized questions, which can make a study hard if you don't have standardized questions because it's hard to have a comparison between child. Schemes are similar to having a set of rules or procedures that can be repeated and generalized across various situations. Schemes are also known as kind of categorical mental sets that we kind of file different types of information accordingly based on um, all sorts of classifications, whether it be by object, whether it be by color, etc. During their second year, children develop symbolic schemes, and older children manipulate symbols in their head. Piaget took interactionist perspective on nature versus nurture. Children actively create knowledge by building schemes from their experiences, which is nurture, using two inborn intellectual functions, organization and adaptation. In organization, children systematically combine existing schemes into new and more complex ones, and adaptation deals with the process of adjusting to the demands of an environment. Adaptation occurs through two complementary processes known as assimilation and accommodation. Assimilation is the process by which we interpret new experiences in terms of existing schemes or cognitive structures, whereas accommodation is the process of modifying existing schemas to better fit new experiences. So assimilation and accommodation help us throughout the lifespan. Assimilation is when we are learning information that we can easily file into those schemes that we've already learned. Accommodation is when we're learning new information that we cannot find a place for in already existing schemes or schemas, so we have to modify the whole category. Piaget thought we are motivated to reduce conflict through equilibration, process of achieving mental stability where internal thoughts are consistent with the evidence received from the external world. Piaget's distinct stages of cognitive development. He identified the sensory motor stage as being birth to about 2, the pre-operational stage 2 to 7, the concrete operational stage 7 to 11, and last but not least, the formal operation stage roughly 11 and beyond. Piaget's contributions. He asked important questions that continue to guide the study of cognitive development, which is true especially in children. Showed us that infants and children are active in their own development, and they taught us that people think differently than older people do, and was largely accurate in his basic description of cognitive development, which is definitely the case. And now that I'm looking here, I don't think I shared my screen. Share screen. Share. Okay. Hmm. Okay, we did that, we did that. Now challenges of Piaget's theory. Let me see if I can put this in slideshow from current slide. Okay. Four common criticisms of what Piaget posited: underestimating cognitive abilities of infants and young children, wrongly claiming that broad stages of development exist, failing to adequately explain development, giving limited attention to social influences and environment on cognitive behavior, which usually is the largest theoretical criticism of many theories. So now we're going to talk about Vygotsky and his sociocultural perspective on development. Vygotsky indicated that culture and society plays a major role in development, that it wasn't all biological. He expected cognitive development to vary from society to society, depends on the mental tools that the culture values, makes, and makes available. Children acquire mental tools by interacting with parents and other more experienced members of a culture. According to Vygotsky, he identified various zones of proximal development, which are defined as the gap between what a learner can accomplish independently and what he or she can accomplish with guidance and encouragement of a more skilled partner. And that's really pivotal, because we see that in children all of the time, where we are looking at them and measuring how much can they really do by themselves, and where is that gap where I have to then help them. Skills within the zone, skills at which instruction should be aimed to further their independence, and skills outside the zone, either well mastered or still too difficult. Implication of the zone of proximal development is that knowledge is not a fixed state. No single test or score can adequately reflect the range of a person's knowledge. Development consists of moving toward the upper range of the zone. In many cultures, children learn by guided participation, where they're encouraged by parents and caregivers to help them with an activity. Parents provide scaffolding for children's development. The more skilled person gives structured help to a less skilled learner. To Piaget, child's level of cognitive development determines what he or she can learn. To Vygotsky, learning in collaboration with more knowledgeable companions drives cognitive development. Vygotsky believed that mental activity is mediated by tools. Adults use tools to pass culturally valued modes of thinking and problem solving to their children, such as spoken language, writing, and using numbers. Vygotsky specifically argued that language shapes thought. Thought changes fundamentally once we begin to think in words, which is true. Preschool children use private speech, speech to oneself that guides one's thoughts and behaviors. It is a critical step in the development of mature thought, and it also is the forerunner of the silent thinking in words adults use. And if you think about how you think, I'm sure you can identify times where you're kind of talking to yourself, whether that be internally or externally, when you're trying to solve a problem or do something. I do that all of the time. 3 and 4-year-olds use private speech. 4-year-olds are more likely to use it systematically when engaged in a sustained activity, more likely during open-ended activities, and intellectually capable children rely more heavily on private speech. Heavy use contributes to effective problem-solving performance. So in terms of looking at Vygotsky's theory and people who've evaluated it, some of the criticism includes placing too much emphasis on social interaction. I personally don't think that it did that, but others do. Assume that all knowledge and understanding of the world is transmitted through social interaction. Many think Piaget and Vygotsky have opposing theories, kind of like nature versus nurture, and both acknowledge the importance of the social context of development. So more modern approaches, because Piaget and Vygotsky were not considered modern or contemporary theory. Neo-constructivism theory is new knowledge constructed through changes in the neural structures of the brain in response to experiences. Classic theories like Piaget developed before precise reaction time and eye tracking measures. Fisher studied study of development should happen in a natural context. Skill levels change and develop. Fisher proposes a series of 4 tiers: reflexive, sensory motor action, representations, and abstractions. Uses concept of zone of proximal development to explain how cognition advances from one level to another, and again addressing that gap between. Uses term developmental range to better capture their findings that people's abilities vary through context, which is very important. Evolutionary theorists consider how characteristics and behaviors may have developed our ancestors, may have helped our ancestors successfully adapt and survive in their environments. Pretend play, play in which one actor, object, or action symbolizes or stands for another, which usually starts around age 1, very, very common. We have evolved in ways that prepare us to learn. It was the thought behind evolutionary development. In infancy, newborns lack an understanding of object permanence. Object permanence is the idea that an object still exists if it's not in my immediate vision. And infants will learn that essentially, but it's not a natural skill. So again, it gradually develops. A not B error is the tendency of 8 to 12 month olds to search for an object in the place where they last found it. A rather than its new hiding place, B, which is also very common. Babies know more about object permanence than they reveal through their actions. In some situations, looking may developmentally precede reaching for an object. In other situations, infants' looking behavior does not predict subsequent action on an object. Symbolic capacity is an ability to use images, words, or gestures to represent or stand for objects and experiences. Most important cognitive achievement of infancy: primary versus secondary circular reactions. Primary circular, infants repeating actions related to their own bodies that had initially happened by chance. So like sneezing. Although we can't predict it, it kind of happens extemporaneously, and then it's more likely going to happen again, and it's more autonomically driven. Secondary, infants derive pleasure from repeatedly performing an action, such as sucking or banging a toy, and that usually occurs at 4 to 8 months. Coordination of secondary schemes. Infants combine secondary actions to achieve simple goals occurring at 8 to 12 months. And the final substage, beginning of thought, evidence of symbolic capacity where one object can be used to represent another, and that usually occurs around 18 months. In terms of childhood, there is more of a symbolic capacity. Greatest cognitive strength of the preschooler. Child can use words to refer to things and feelings. They can refer to past and future events. They can pretend or use fantasy play. They have imaginary companions sometimes, and it's associated with advanced cognitive and social development and higher levels of creativity, so that symbolic capacity starts to develop in preschool. Preschoolers focus on perceptual salience, the most obvious features of an object or situation. Preschoolers can be fooled by appearances. They have difficulty with tasks that require them to use logic because, again, that's in the forebrain. The forebrain is kind of the last to develop. Young children are fooled by their perceptions, unable to engage in decentration, ability to focus on 2 or more dimensions of a problem at once, And pre-operational thinkers engage in centration, where they're devoting all of their mental resource to one object or a single aspect of a problem. Reversibility is a contributor to success on conservation tasks, the process of mentally undoing or reversing an action. Pre-operational thinkers fail to demonstrate conservation because of limitations in transformational thought, the ability to conceptualize transformations. Conservation is the idea that certain properties of an object or substance do not change when its appearance is altered in some superficial way. Centration is the tendency to center attention on a single aspect of a problem. And again, decentration is the ability to focus on two or more aspects of a problem at once. Reversibility is the process of mentally undoing or reversing an action. And transformational thought is the ability to conceptualize transformations or processes of change from one state to another. And lastly, static thought is fixed thought on end states rather than changes that transform one state into another, which can be problematic for children, adults, adolescents, etc. Egocentrism is a tendency to view the world solely from their own perspective and to have difficulty recognizing others' points of view, which is very common in childhood and through adolescence. And class inclusion is the logical understanding that the parts are included in the whole. Concrete operational children are capable of the logical operation of seriation, enables them to arrange items mentally along a quantifiable dimension such as length or weight. Also master the related concept of transitivity, describing the necessary relations among elements in a series. So they're able to categorize and identify similarities and differences within and between categories. In adolescence, formal operational thought is also more abstract than concrete. And this is where we begin to get formal operational thought. It also permits systematic and scientific thinking about problems, and the hypothetical deductive reasoning begins, where there's reasoning from general ideas or rules to their specific implications. So hypothetical reasoning is when we are thinking in what if terms, where we kind of conceptualize a problem based on what if something happens. Intuitive and scientific reasoning coexist in older thinkers. Adolescents are able to contextualize, separate prior knowledge and beliefs from the demands of a task at hand. And achievement of formal operational thinking depends on opportunities to learn scientific reasoning. Formal operational thought may prepare individuals to gain a sense of identity, think in more complex ways, especially with moral issues, understand other people better. Questioning can lead to confusion and rebellion against ideas, and kind of setting adolescents apart from just kind of following blindly a particular goal, value, tradition, and kind of question whether that's something they want to adopt themselves, which is something we've all gone through and continue to go through. Adolescent egocentrism is the difficulty differentiating one's own thoughts and feelings from those of others, which is definitely hard at that age. An imaginary audience is where it's confusing your own thoughts with those of a hypothesized audience of your behavior. So it's their perception of how they're going to be perceived by others. And a personal fable is a tendency to think that you and your thoughts and feelings are unique. In adulthood, adults are likely to use formal operations in a field of expertise. So especially at work, you see a lot of formal operational thinking. Performance is likely to be highly inconsistent across content areas unless the person has had a chance to build knowledge and skills, which is what we would hope for in a work environment. Post-formal thought is more complex than formal operational. Relativistic thinking is knowledge dependent on its context and the subjective perspective of the knower. And dialectical thinking is detecting paradoxes and inconsistencies among ideas and trying to reconcile them. In a lot of, with a lot of mental disorders, especially certain personality disorders, one of the recommended treatments is dialectical behavioral therapy, where a person is actively detecting these paradoxes and inconsistencies so that they can then reconcile them and hopefully the behavior will change. Aging and cognitive skill. Some mental abilities decline as the average person ages. Other explanations might include the cohort effect, maybe differences in style and lack of motivation. Okay, and I think that'll do it. I do want you to think on that last slide that I went over, I do want you to think about why some adults decline is and more steady than others. And there's a lot of environmental contributions to why that might be. And that'll do it for this chapter, or this unit rather. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.